Airline staff laugh at black woman's accent. Minutes later, they're fired by their new CEO. A single laugh can change a life, and sometimes it can cost you your dreams. Picture this. A young black woman, exhausted from traveling for hours, steps up to the check-in counter at an airport. She's polite, her voice tinged with the accent of her home country, but it prompts ridicule from the uniformed employees behind the desk. Unbeknownst to everyone in that bustling terminal, destiny is shifting. Within minutes, those jeering staff members realize they've humiliated the wrong passenger. Their new CEO is watching from the sidelines, and he holds the power to end their careers with a single directive. It was just after dawn in the busiest airport in the world, Atlanta's Hartsfield-Jackson. Soft sunlight streamed in through tall windows, illuminating thousands of hurried travelers. Among the bustling crowd was Imani Johnson, a young woman of Ghanaian and American heritage, who was returning to the United States after spending several weeks visiting family in Accra. She was petite, with close cropped black hair and a deep, confident gaze. A pink carry-on suitcase jostled behind her as she carefully navigated the winding lines. Imani had always heard rumors that airport staff could be impatient or rude, but she tried to see the good in everyone. After a restless overnight flight, she was anxious to check in for her connecting trip and be on her way to a job orientation in Atlanta. She had big plans. The job was at the corporate headquarters of a major airline, one that was expanding routes all over the globe, with a strong emphasis on diversity and multicultural engagement. Little did she know, fate would intervene before she even left the terminal. As she approached the check-in counter for an airline called Sky Blue Air, she noticed two agents behind the desk, Vanessa Hill and Daniel Porter. Both wore crisp uniforms featuring the Sky Blue Air logo pinned with bright name badges. Vanessa, in her mid-30s, had meticulously styled brown hair and a forced, hollow smile that seemed reserved more for show than genuine hospitality. Daniel, a younger employee, stood just behind her, tapping on a keyboard. Imani offered a polite nod, grateful to finally arrive at the desk after a long wait. "Good morning," she greeted them, her voice colored by the subtle echoes of her Ghanaian upbringing, her natural tone warm and respectful. All she wanted was to check in, confirm her seat, and head to the gate. Vanessa's lips curled into a smirk. "Passport, please," she said, eyeing Imani's travel documents. Almost immediately, Vanessa made a face as though she had picked up on Imani's accent, and within seconds, she started glancing sideways at Daniel, who began to grin behind his computer. That grin told Imani something was amiss. "Flight number and your final destination?" Vanessa asked in a monotone, staring at the screen without really looking at Imani. "I'm traveling to Dallas," Imani replied politely, ignoring the mild sense of unease creeping into her consciousness. "Then after a short stay, I'll connect to Houston." Vanessa looked up with the faintest roll of her eyes. "You're traveling to Dallas," she echoed, pronouncing it with a mocking exaggeration of Imani's accent. Daniel snorted softly, and in that moment, Imani could feel the wave of humiliation building inside her. It was subtle enough that a casual observer might miss it, but the ridicule was undeniable. She tried to keep her composure, hoping it might be a misunderstanding. "Excuse me, what did you say?" Imani asked calmly, trying to hide the tremor of hurt in her voice. If they were teasing her, maybe calling them out would stop it. Vanessa maintained her condescending tone. "I said Dallas, miss. That's your final destination, correct?" The tension thickened as Daniel offered a sneer that was half laugh, half smile. He hid it behind a quick cough, then added, "May I see your visa stamps, if any?" Without saying it directly, Daniel seemed to imply that because of Imani's accent, she might have an issue with her documentation. It was a microaggression disguised as procedure. As the minutes ticked by, a short queue formed behind Imani. She handed over the passport with all the correct stamps. Vanessa and Daniel whispered something under their breath, then exchanged a glance that signaled private amusement. Imani's cheeks burned with a mix of anger and embarrassment. It was not the first time she'd been on the receiving end of rude treatment over her accent, but somehow it stung more in the heart of a city that prided itself on diversity and hospitality. The morning travelers behind her had no idea the drama that was brewing. Some were glued to their phones, others readjusted carry-ons or typed away on laptops. Meanwhile, the humiliations continued in subtle, clipped remarks from Vanessa, repeated use of miss in a condescending tone, and Daniel's constant snickers. In the corner of her eye, Imani saw a man in a suit walk past. He paused, his attention caught by the scene playing out at the counter. His expression was watchful, but Imani couldn't place him. She sighed, wishing she could wrap up this whole ordeal. Little did she know, that suited man was David Chambers, the recently appointed CEO of Sky Blue Air, incognito, to survey how his employees treated customers at ground level. Before the morning was over, these two airline employees would regret their mocking laughter, and not just because decency demanded they treat people kindly. Their sneers and whispered jibes had not gone unnoticed by the most powerful person in the company. Imani tried to remain gracious, but her patience was waning with each new remark. She caught sight of Vanessa discreetly gesturing toward her lips, as though poking fun at the shape of her mouth as she spoke. The cruelty was quiet enough that someone not paying attention could overlook it. But to Imani, it was unmistakable. She took a deep breath. Anger threatened to bubble over, but she reminded herself that she was on an important schedule. She had a job orientation to attend, and no time to engage in a shouting match with ignorant gate agents. When Vanessa's tone became openly sarcastic, Imani glanced back at the man in the suit. He lingered near a pillar, pretending to scroll through his phone. His gaze occasionally flicked upward, scanning the check-in area with cool precision. Though she didn't know it, this was David Chambers, the newly minted CEO who had come from a top executive position at a competing airline. Rumor had it he was on a mission to revamp Sky Blue Air's culture, focusing on customer experience and employee ethics. For months, employees had heard chatter that he would be observing them in plain clothes, but few believed he would go as far as to actually do it. David was a lean man in his early 40s, with close cropped hair flecked with grey. A quiet confidence radiated from him, not the brash arrogance of someone high on power. He watched the check-in counter, face carefully neutral, yet inside every muscle tensed with frustration. The directive from the Sky Blue board had been clear: improve the airline's reputation as a warm, welcoming brand or risk major losses. He believed wholeheartedly in the importance of respect, particularly across diverse backgrounds. Imani, oblivious to the identity of her silent observer, simply hoped her ordeal would end soon. Vanessa tapped her long nails on the desk, scanning through the flight details. "Please confirm your seat preference, Miss Johnson," Vanessa said curtly. "We have you in economy class on flight 203 to Dallas, and after your layover, flight 405 to Houston." While the statement itself was innocuous, she emphasized the words as though doubting Imani could understand. Sensing the simmering hostility, Imani replied in a measured tone, "Economy is fine for this trip, thank you." She didn't need a fight, she just needed to move on. Behind the desk, Daniel snorted again. The sound grated on Imani's nerves. She shifted her stance, the handle of her carry-on digging into her hand. She was sure others heard the humiliating undertone. A wave of relief washed over her when Vanessa finally passed her the boarding passes. "Is that all, Miss Johnson?" Vanessa asked, voice coated in a veneer of professionalism. Only the slightest curl at the edge of her lips betrayed her contempt. Imani nodded, relieved to be done with it. "Yes, that's all," she said, grabbing her documents and turning away. She felt the heat of embarrassment creeping up her neck, but she forced herself to take steady steps toward the security checkpoint. Her dignity was intact. She refused to let them shatter it. Suddenly, a polite cough behind her made her stop. She turned around to see David Chambers, now stepping out of the shadows. "Ma'am," he said gently, "I couldn't help noticing." He paused, glancing over her shoulder at Vanessa and Daniel. They were busy mocking another passenger, who seemed equally uncomfortable. David turned back to Imani, a flicker of concern and apology in his eyes. "If you don't mind me asking, are you all right?" Imani was taken aback. This man was a stranger. In airports, most people minded their own business. His approach was unusual. She managed a small, polite smile. "I'm fine, thank you," she said, although her voice wavered slightly, betraying the lingering sting of humiliation. David nodded, seemingly satisfied with her answer. He glanced down at her boarding passes. "Heading to Dallas today?" "Yes," she replied, curiosity piqued. "I have a job orientation. I'm supposed to start tomorrow." She told him about the corporate position she'd landed at a large airline. She omitted the fact that it was Sky Blue Air, because it still felt uncertain. She wasn't even sure what department they'd assign her to, only that it involved the brand's global communications division. David's eyes glinted with recognition. "Well, good luck, Miss Johnson," he said with quiet warmth. "If you have any trouble with your flight, please let me know." He pulled out a plain business card from his jacket and handed it to her. Imani read the simple black text, "David Chambers, CEO, Sky Blue Air." Her eyes widened in shock. She looked from the card to him. "You're the CEO?" she whispered. The gravity of the moment sank in. She had assumed he was just another traveler. Something about his gentle demeanor or the respectful way he spoke had put her at ease. He inclined his head, a faint smile playing on his lips. "Yes, I am. I like to see how things run on the ground, incognito. It helps me spot issues." Stunned, Imani could only nod. She wanted to thank him, but her words caught in her throat. In the end, David gave a small wave of goodbye and turned toward the check-in desk, where Vanessa and Daniel were still quietly laughing at another passenger. Imani couldn't hear what they were saying, but their gestures and stifled grins suggested something similarly disrespectful. As Imani walked away, heart pounding, she couldn't shake the realization that those rude employees might be about to face serious repercussions. Watching David approach them in his inconspicuous suit, she saw a steely resolve in his posture. She had a sneaking suspicion that by day's end, the trajectory of certain careers would be irrevocably changed. David paused behind a row of travelers, listening to how Vanessa and Daniel interacted with each new person. He didn't interrupt right away. Part of his leadership philosophy was to gather full information before making a final judgment. What he observed, however, left little room for excuses. Both agents repeatedly displayed the same pattern of snide remarks, forced smiles, and condescending tones. One young woman in line spoke with a thick French accent, asking for directions. Vanessa deliberately feigned not understanding her. "I'm sorry, what was that?" she asked, stretching out the last word with a mocking intonation. Daniel stifled a snicker, turning away to hide his smirk. Finally, the passenger gave up and stepped away, confusion and embarrassment evident on her face. It was a textbook case of poor customer service, but more importantly, it was laced with prejudice. Rudeness can sometimes be chalked up to stress or exhaustion, but here, David saw something uglier, an intolerance for non-American accents. It outraged him, especially since Sky Blue Air prided itself on championing global connectivity and inclusivity. His blood boiled. The brand mission he had spent countless hours refining was being tarnished right in front of him. Worse, it was happening in his airline's flagship airport, the busiest in the world. He could already imagine the headlines if such behavior went viral. Though David wore no official corporate ID on his lapel, he approached the counter with the quiet authority of someone who knew he had the final say. Vanessa barely acknowledged him as she was fiddling with her phone. Daniel, too, offered only a cursory glance. "Excuse me," David said politely, pulling out a piece of paper from his pocket, "an itinerary for a flight to New York City, though the booking was a decoy. I need some assistance with my flight." Vanessa eyed him, bored. "Boarding pass?" she asked, not even looking up. Then, noticing he was wearing a crisp suit, she added a touch more politeness. "Which flight are you on, sir?" David placed the decoy itinerary on the counter, but his next question was anything but ordinary. "Before we discuss that, can you explain why you felt it was appropriate to laugh at the accents of the last two passengers you served?" Vanessa froze. Her eyes flicked up to meet David's. Uncertainty flashed across her face. Daniel also stiffened, arms crossing defensively. I'm not sure what you mean," Vanessa began, but her voice quivered. She quickly composed herself. "I was simply asking them standard questions, sir." David leaned forward, lowering his voice. "Is that so?" he said. "Because what I observed was the two of you publicly mocking travelers who struggle with English or speak with accents. That's not only rude, it's entirely unacceptable for Sky Blue Air employees." A sharp line creased Daniel's forehead as he spoke up. "Look, we don't know who you are, but we're just doing our jobs. If these people can't speak English properly, that's on them, not on us." Shocked by Daniel's brazen retort, David let out a slow breath, attempting to maintain composure. He recalled his own experiences traveling the world, the beauty of hearing different languages, the thrill of global discovery. This was precisely the attitude he wanted to root out of his airline. "Maybe you should pay closer attention to how you treat people," David said quietly, pulling out his wallet and revealing his official Sky Blue Air ID card. The badge glistened under the fluorescent airport lights, its distinct design signifying his top-tier rank. "Because your jobs depend on it." Vanessa's face went pale. Daniel took a step back, color draining from his cheeks. He stammered, You're David Chambers?" David nodded, not relishing the confrontation, but knowing it was necessary. "I am, and I'm disappointed in what I've seen and heard. Sky Blue Air has specific guidelines about respect, inclusivity, and customer service. You violated them. There will be consequences." Vanessa and Daniel exchanged panicked glances. Other travelers nearby started to pay attention. Some even pulled out their phones. The tension at the counter was palpable. David wished this wasn't unfolding so publicly, but these two had chosen a very public place to mistreat passengers. Daniel tried one last, desperate defense. "Mr. Chambers, I'm under stress," he said, voice trembling. We're short-staffed. It's not easy dealing with hundreds of passengers. Maybe you misunderstood." Vanessa nodded vigorously, echoing Daniel's attempt at spinning the story. "We didn't mean to offend. Sometimes people take things the wrong way. It's so busy here." David listened, but the lines of his face hardened. "Your tone and words made your intentions very clear. I heard every snide remark. You're supposed to be ambassadors for our airline, representing our brand mission. Instead, you've turned it into a platform for ridicule. We can't tolerate that." Vanessa's eyes welled up with tears. She looked at Daniel, then back at David. "Please, sir," she pleaded, "don't fire us. We need these jobs. It's just a misunderstanding." For a moment, David's gaze softened. He hated being the arbiter of people's livelihoods. He knew well that job security was crucial, but the weight of corporate responsibility pressed upon him. If he tolerated such behavior, what message would that send to every other employee? Keeping his voice quiet and firm, David said, "Go to the employee lounge and wait for your immediate supervisor. I'll be speaking with them at length." Turning to Daniel, he added, "You as well. Gather your belongings and proceed there right now." Vanessa and Daniel slowly complied, heads hanging low. As they left, David could almost feel the mixture of curiosity and approval radiating from the travelers in line. One or two even clapped quietly, relieved to see some justice. Imani, waiting near the security line, caught sight of the confrontation's finale. She felt a pang of empathy for the employees, even if they deserved this lesson. The entire scenario had escalated in a way she never anticipated. She took a deep breath, preparing herself to proceed to her gate. She had a job orientation to attend, and ironically, her future boss had just demonstrated one of the most transparent disciplinary actions she'd ever seen. Despite her exhaustion from the trip, something about David's uncompromising stand on dignity and respect gave her a sense of hope. Perhaps this was exactly the type of leadership she needed in her life, a leader unafraid to speak up for what was right, especially when it came to treating people with decency. Little did she know, the drama was only beginning. Boarding her connecting flight to Dallas, Imani tried to push aside the morning's humiliation. Exhaustion weighed on her, yet a flicker of hope remained. Just before takeoff, a notification lit her phone, a brief text from David Chambers. He apologized again for her treatment at the check-in counter and offered his support if she needed anything further. Stunned by his personal outreach, Imani managed a quick reply of gratitude. During the short flight, she gazed out the window, reflecting on her upcoming job orientation. The sky outside felt symbolic, endless possibilities lying ahead. Upon landing at Dallas-Fort Worth International Airport, she retrieved her luggage, took a taxi to her hotel, and briefly collapsed on the bed, finally releasing a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. The next day, she would step into Sky Blue Air's headquarters, determined to make the most of her new start and leave the unsettling airport incident firmly behind her. The next morning, Imani arrived bright and early at the Sky Blue Gateway Center. Its reflective glass facade soared into the sky, a monument to modern architecture. Blue accents ran along the building's edges, echoing the airline's brand color. Flags from various nations lined the entrance walkway, a testament to the global reach Sky Blue Air prided itself on. It was a poignant symbol, especially after the events in Atlanta. Stepping through the sliding glass doors, Imani was greeted by a security guard who checked her ID. Then she moved to the main lobby, where a sleek reception desk sat beneath a colossal skylight. The sign overhead read Sky Blue Air Corporate Headquarters, and behind it, an enormous digital screen showcased real-time flight routes and corporate videos promoting bringing the world together. A woman in business attire approached, smile wide, eyes warm. Her name badge read, Cheryl Lee, HR Coordinator. "Miss Johnson, welcome. We're thrilled to have you. I'm Cheryl, your point person for orientation. How was your flight?" Imani hesitated. Should she mention the fiasco at the check-in counter? Perhaps not in this initial greeting. "It was fine, thank you," she said, returning the smile. "I'm excited to be here." Cheryl led Imani into a large conference room on the 20th floor. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of Dallas, and the space was decorated in soft hues of blue and gray. Seated around a sprawling oval table were about a dozen other new hires, a mosaic of ages, backgrounds and expressions, some nervous, some eager. "Everyone, this is Imani Johnson," Cheryl said, introducing her. Imani offered a quick wave and found a seat. She sized up her peers, a tall guy flipping through an onboarding binder, a woman with bright red hair glancing anxiously at her phone, a pair of friends chatting in hushed tones. The energy in the room buzzed with cautious excitement. Cheryl kicked off the session with an overview of Sky Blue Air's history. The airline began as a small regional carrier decades ago and evolved into an international powerhouse. Maps on the slides highlighted various routes, including expansions in Africa and Asia. As the orientation continued, each department head gave a short presentation: marketing, logistics, finance, and more. Imani's turn came to meet the communications director, Maria Pacheco. She explained the brand's vision to connect cultures through safe and welcoming flight experiences. As Maria spoke about the brand's emphasis on inclusivity, Imani's thoughts strayed momentarily to the incident at the check-in. It was ironic that the marketing materials trumpeted diversity, while a pair of frontline employees had exhibited the opposite behavior. Still, that was precisely why David Chambers was on the warpath to correct it. Imani found the presentations both fascinating and overwhelming. The scale of operations was huge, from cargo logistics to in-flight culinary services. Each piece had to mesh perfectly to keep planes flying on schedule. After a few hours of information sessions, the group broke for lunch in a plush cafeteria. Floor-to-ceiling windows again showcased the city skyline. Tables, potted plants, and a variety of international cuisine stations made the space feel like a high-end food court. Imani selected a Thai stir-fry dish, found a seat near a window, and was soon joined by Zoe Walker, a fellow new hire with curly blonde hair and bright, inquisitive eyes. They swapped short introductions. Zoe was from a small town in Arizona, fresh out of college, hired into the digital marketing team. Imani shared that she was from a Ghanaian-American background and had traveled extensively before settling in the US. During their casual conversation, Imani felt a tap on her shoulder. Turning around, she was startled to see David Chambers himself. He held a small tray of food, wearing a friendly grin. "May I join you?" he asked, polite as ever. Speechless, Imani nodded. Zoe nearly dropped her fork in shock. "Absolutely, sir," she said, looking like she was meeting a celebrity. David took a seat, setting down his tray. "Call me David, please," he said, ensuring a relaxed vibe. "I like to meet our new team members informally. How's orientation going for you both?" Zoe recovered first, praising the thoroughness of the morning sessions. Imani echoed the sentiment, though her heartbeat hammered a bit faster in the CEO's presence. Despite his unassuming manner, the power imbalance was undeniable. David turned to Imani. "Glad to see you made it here without further incidents," he said softly, referencing the check-in debacle. Zoe shot Imani a questioning look, but politely remained silent. Imani nodded. "Yes, everything's been great," she said, measuring her words carefully. "It's a big relief to be in Dallas safely and start learning about the company." David's smile was warm. "I heard from HR. You might end up working in the Global Communications Division under Maria Pacheco. She's keen to have more voices who've lived and traveled internationally." "That's right," Imani confirmed. She saw no need to elaborate on the fiasco in front of Zoe. Something shifted in David's gaze, a flicker of seriousness clouding his eyes. "Listen, I won't keep you from your lunch, but I did want to let you know that certain issues are being addressed. You should never face what happened at our counters ever." His tone left no room for ambiguity. Imani murmured her thanks, cheeks flushing. Zoe, sensing there was more to the story, gently changed the subject to a question about marketing budgets. David answered politely, but glanced back at Imani, as if to assure her that resolution was underway. Then he excused himself to mingle with other new hires. Zoe leaned forward the moment he was out of earshot. "Okay, what was that about?" she whispered conspiratorially. Imani shrugged, not wanting to stir up gossip. "I just had a little issue at the airport. He happened to be there. He helped out, that's all." Zoe's eyes widened. "Lucky you. He's practically a legend in the airline industry. Word is, when he was at Aerostar, he fired half a department for unethical practices. He doesn't play around. Imani tensed slightly, the gravity of David's decisive approach hitting her again. She wondered if Vanessa and Daniel were already out of a job. A swirl of feelings coursed through her, sadness at the cruelty they showed, empathy for whatever led them to act that way, and relief that someone in power took immediate action. The rest of the lunch break passed in a blur. Imani mingled with a few more colleagues, but her thoughts drifted to the next steps. In the afternoon sessions, she noticed whispers among the HR staff. Some looked in her direction with curiosity or approval. She wasn't sure which. By day's end, the rumor mill was swirling. Word had spread that David Chambers had confronted employees who mocked a passenger's accent. The details were hazy, but many guessed that those employees were already facing termination. This speculation only heightened the tension as new hires chattered in hushed voices. When the orientation concluded that day, Imani felt both exhausted and invigorated. She stepped out of the sky blue Gateway Center into the mild Dallas evening air, mentally preparing for the next day of training. Her phone chimed a text from David. "We'll schedule a meeting soon to discuss your experiences. I want to ensure your feedback is part of our improvement plan. D." Chambers Imani read the message with a tinge of disbelief. When did a CEO ever personally text a new hire for feedback? But then again, none of this felt typical. From the humiliating airport incident to the hushed rumors in the break rooms, everything about her first week at Sky Blue Air was extraordinary. She texted a polite acknowledgement back, determined to be helpful and constructive. Little did she know, the next day would bring an even larger twist. For while the orientation group was still learning the basics of corporate culture, behind closed doors, the hammer of justice was about to fall on Vanessa and Daniel, and it would reverberate through the entire company. The following day began like any other orientation day: coffee, name badges, group exercises on leadership and teamwork. But there was an undercurrent of gossip in the air, and Imani soon discovered why. Around mid-morning, her phone buzzed a notification from a corporate email. The subject line read, "Important staff announcement from the CEO." Imani glanced around and noticed others staring at their devices with wide eyes. Cheryl, the HR coordinator, approached the podium at the front of the training room. "Everyone," she said, her voice trembling with a mix of excitement and concern, "please check your email, Mr. Chambers has addressed a sensitive matter regarding employee conduct." Imani swallowed hard, opening the email. It was brief yet powerful. "To all Sky Blue Air staff, yesterday, I personally observed unacceptable behavior from two of our colleagues at Hartsfield-Jackson Atlanta International Airport. These employees mocked and disrespected passengers due to their accents and cultural backgrounds. Effective immediately, the individuals involved are no longer employed with Sky Blue Air. Our airline's mission is to foster global connectivity and respect for all. We cannot and will not tolerate discrimination or harassment in any form. Our customers and employees deserve the highest standard of respect, empathy, and professionalism. Going forward, we will conduct a thorough review of our hiring and training processes. Additional diversity and inclusion workshops will be mandated for all frontline staff to ensure this behavior is never repeated. Let this serve as a reminder of our core values: compassion, respect, and excellence. Sincerely, David Chambers, CEO, Sky Blue Air. Imani's eyes skimmed the text twice, her heart thudding in her chest. A hush fell over the orientation group as they realized the magnitude of what they were reading. Vanessa Hill and Daniel Porter had officially been fired. The email was direct and firm, leaving no room for doubt. Slowly, a murmur rose in the room. Some new hires exchanged looks, half horrified by the reality of such an abrupt dismissal, half relieved that the company took the matter seriously. Zoe looked at Imani questioningly, as if to confirm her suspicions about the airport drama. Imani only nodded slightly, acknowledging she had been involved. Cheryl cleared her throat. I know this is a serious message, and some of you may find it unsettling, but it's also an important reminder that Sky Blue Air stands for inclusion and respect. Please, if you have any questions, you can direct them to HR or to your departmental supervisors. The orientation proceeded with a tangible tension in the air. The theme of the day was corporate ethics and compliance, a topic that suddenly felt urgent and relevant. Presenters stressed the importance of unbiased service, referencing the newly announced measures. Imani felt a swirl of emotions, vindication that Vanessa and Daniel's actions had real consequences, empathy for the complexity of the situation, and a reaffirmed sense that she had chosen the right company, one where justice was not just a slogan. Later that afternoon, Imani was called out of the orientation session for a one-on-one meeting. A soft-spoken HR representative named Harold Murray guided her to a smaller conference room. There, David Chambers waited, seated at the head of a polished wooden table. A glass of water and a notepad lay in front of him. "Miss Johnson," he greeted, standing up as she entered. "Thank you for coming." Imani inclined her head. Of course. She glanced around the windowless room, feeling a slight flutter of anxiety. The environment felt formal, high stakes. But David's calm demeanor put her at ease. He gestured for her to sit across from him. "I wanted to follow up on the incident at Atlanta's airport. You were directly affected, and your perspective is invaluable as we refine our training and policies." Harold took a seat next to David, opening a file. "We're documenting everything thoroughly," he explained. Imani inhaled deeply, steadying herself. "I appreciate the swift action," she began, voice measured. "I think it sends a strong message that Sky Blue Air values respect. But I also hope we look at the root cause. Was this a training oversight? Did they have a history of similar complaints?" David and Harold exchanged looks. "We've discovered a pattern of complaints against them," David admitted, an edge creeping into his normally composed voice. "Minor complaints, which seem to slip through the cracks. That can't happen again. We're implementing new systems to track customer feedback more effectively." Imani nodded, understanding the complexity. "I do feel for them as people, but they crossed a line. Still, not every instance of discrimination is so overt. You might need better training and oversight to catch microaggressions that often go unreported." David scribbled notes, nodding, "Absolutely. We plan to introduce mandatory cultural sensitivity modules for all frontline employees. I'd like your input, maybe from a cross-cultural perspective, if you're comfortable sharing." Imani's heart quickened. She was barely on her second day, and the CEO was already inviting her input on high-level policy. "I'd be honored," she said, maintaining her composure. "I grew up in a bicultural household. I've witnessed firsthand how accents can attract ridicule or curiosity. It's definitely something we can educate people about." Harold chimed in. "That's exactly the kind of insight we need. We'd also like to highlight real stories from employees who've faced language-based harassment. It could help develop empathy." They spoke for nearly an hour, the conversation wide-ranging yet focused. Imani proposed potential role-playing exercises during training, where employees could experience the vulnerability of traveling in a foreign language. David mentioned forging partnerships with advocacy groups that address xenophobia and racism. Harold took meticulous notes, occasionally pausing to clarify details. By the end, Imani felt both drained and invigorated. She had never expected to play such a key role so soon. As she rose to leave, David gave her a grateful smile. "Thank you, Imani. You've given us a lot to think about." She offered a polite nod, stepping out into the corridor. Her mind buzzed with the gravity of what had just taken place. She'd had the ear of the CEO, someone who genuinely seemed determined to cultivate an inclusive culture, not just talk about it. The knowledge that Vanessa and Daniel had been fired mere hours after their mockery still weighed on her. She believed in second chances, but she also recognized the necessity of strong boundaries. On her way back to the orientation room, she paused at a large window overlooking the city. The sun bathed Dallas's streets in golden light. It struck her as symbolic: new day, new beginnings, and a new chance to shape a company's culture. But she also understood how delicate change could be. One harsh comment could fracture trust in an instant. It was a precarious dance of good intentions, policies, and real human behavior. A sigh escaped her lips. She had come to Sky Blue Air to start a career in global communications. Little did she know she'd be thrust into a pivotal moment that might alter the entire airline's approach to diversity and respect. While she couldn't rewrite the past, she could help shape the future, and that thought filled her with cautious optimism. Word spread quickly throughout the organization about Vanessa and Daniel's abrupt termination. Gossip networks lit up messages, bounced from airport staff to headquarters, from flight attendants to pilots. Some employees applauded the move, insisting it was high time the airline enforced a zero-tolerance policy for discrimination. Others whispered that David Chambers was on a firing spree, referencing his track record at Aerostar. A fraction felt uneasy about the severity of the punishment. Meanwhile, the entire frontline team at Atlanta's Hartsfield-Jackson was called into a mandatory meeting. Supervisors laid out the new, rigorous guidelines for customer interaction. Sensitivity training modules were scheduled. Some employees grumbled privately, claiming the company was overreacting. But few dared speak openly. The brand new CEO's decisive actions had put everyone on notice. For Imani, life was a whirlwind. She alternated between orientation sessions and assisting HR with shaping portions of the new training materials. In just a handful of days, her role within Sky Blue Air transcended any typical new hire status. Several existing employees, some older and more experienced, raised eyebrows at her rapid involvement in policy discussions. Yet David Chambers championed her perspective. One evening, after a marathon day of meetings, Imani found herself in a quiet corridor, flipping through a draft of the newly designed Diversity and Respect Handbook. Footsteps echoed behind her. Turning, she saw Maria Pacheco, the communications director, approach with a warm smile. "You're burning the midnight oil," Maria teased gently. "Mind if I join you?" Imani exhaled, grateful for a friendly face. Not at all. She tapped the draft in her hands, just reviewing the language. Sometimes the formal wording makes everything sound so corporate. Maria nodded, taking the draft to skim it. "Well, it is corporate policy," she quipped. Then her tone softened. "But I get what you mean. We want sincerity, not stiff legalese. People should feel we genuinely care about inclusivity." Exactly. Imani noted a clause about accent-based discrimination. We need to be direct, but also empathetic in how we address these issues. Maria's gaze rested on Imani, a flicker of admiration in her eyes. "You know, I was set to hire you for an entry-level communications position, but after the last few days, David and I agree that you might be more effective in a specialized role, maybe leading the cultural advocacy sub-team within global communications. It's an idea we're tossing around." Imani's eyes widened. "That's a big responsibility. I'm honored." Maria placed a hand gently on Imani's shoulder. The airline's evolving, and we need people with genuine multicultural insight. You've shown initiative and passion for bridging cultural gaps. That's exactly what we're looking for. Overwhelmed yet thrilled, Imani tried to remain humble. Thank you, it means a lot. I just hope I can do it justice. Maria smiled. Believe me, you can. Let's talk more formally next week. For now, try to get some rest. Imani nodded, returning the handshake. Her mind buzzed with possibilities. A specialized role? Leadership in a sub-team? Even at this early stage, it felt surreal. She tucked the draft manual under her arm, heading to the elevator. The building was nearly empty, lights dimmed, the hum of air conditioning echoing in the vacant hallways. Outside, night cloaked the Dallas skyline, skyscraper windows sparkling like stars. As the elevator descended, Imani thought about corporate karma. Vanessa and Daniel had lost their jobs within minutes of laughing at her. In contrast, Imani's career was skyrocketing. She felt no glee in the punishment they'd received, but she couldn't deny the sense of poetic justice. They had wielded casual cruelty, mocking someone they deemed unimportant, only to be witnessed by the one person who had ultimate power. It was a lesson. Treat every individual with respect, because you never know who might be watching or who they truly are. She stepped out into the lobby, the polished floors reflecting neon lights from outside. A security guard nodded politely as she passed. Pausing at the main door, she took in the name Sky Blue Air Corporate Headquarters once more. She felt strangely at home, despite the building's imposing grandeur. Her phone pinged. A text from her mother: "Just checking on you, dear. How's the new job?" Imani typed a quick reply. "It's been a roller coaster, but in a good way. I'm learning so much and might have a leadership opportunity soon. We'll call you tomorrow. Love you." Stowing her phone, she ventured into the balmy Texas night, the air thick with the promise of more storms to come, and not just weather-related. For while Vanessa and Daniel's termination was final, the ripples of that event would continue to spread. Already, employees were questioning their biases, managers were re-evaluating oversight, and the entire culture of Sky Blue Air was in flux. Over the next few days, Imani jumped into her orientation's final modules and simultaneously collaborated with HR on the new training approach. She swiftly became known among the new hires as someone with direct connections to the CEO and communications director. This dual reputation sparked a mixture of reverence, curiosity, and occasional envy. One afternoon, a quiet new hire named Malik Abdullah approached her in the break room. His posture was tentative, as if unsure whether he should interrupt. "Imani?" he asked, voice low and respectful. She glanced up from her coffee. "Yes, hi," she replied, a smile crossing her lips. Malik was part of the analytics team, based on his orientation badge. "I've been reading the draft manual you're helping with," Malik said, taking a seat across from her. "I'm impressed by the focus on specific examples of microaggressions. That's something I've personally dealt with, people mocking my accent when I first arrived from Egypt years ago." Imani's heart warmed. "I'm sorry you faced that. Unfortunately, it happens more often than many realize. We're trying to address it head-on." Malik nodded, twisting his coffee cup. "I'd like to offer any insights I can provide. Sometimes just having bullet points about cultural sensitivity isn't enough. Stories can illustrate the impact better." She leaned forward, interest piqued. "Stories?" He hesitated, eyes drifting momentarily. "Real narratives. I came to the US for college. I remember the first few weeks, how the cafeteria workers would mimic my accent when I tried to order food. It was subtle, but painful, like every sentence I spoke was a joke." Imani's expression grew empathetic. "That's exactly the sort of personal experience that can open eyes. If you're comfortable, we could weave it into our training." Malik exhaled in relief. That would mean a lot to me. I want to help shape a better environment here. I know we've already seen real action from David Chambers. It's refreshing to see an organization address discrimination so swiftly. Imani agreed wholeheartedly. They exchanged contact details, planning to collaborate after orientation hours. As Malik left, Imani realized this was the first of many alliances she would likely form. Stories like Malik's would personalize the issue, making it harder for dismissive attitudes to persist. Later that day, Zoe approached Imani with a grin. Guess who just got assigned to help with the digital rollout of the new training modules? Imani lifted a brow. You? Zoe nodded enthusiastically. Yes, I'll be working under the marketing director, but David Chambers himself recommended me. Said he noticed I asked about marketing budgets during lunch. She practically glowed with excitement. Anyway, can we collaborate? I'd love to feature your sub-team's content in some interactive e-learning modules. Imani laughed. We're not officially a sub-team yet, but yes, absolutely. Let's do it. It amazed her how the unfortunate incident at the airport had evolved into a catalyst for change, forging camaraderie among new hires who were eager to modernize Sky Blue Air's culture. They all recognized that the airline's reputation hinged on real inclusivity, not just PR statements. The synergy felt electric. Of course, not everyone embraced the change. Imani overheard murmurs from a few long-time employees in the hallways. This is an overreaction. Next, they'll be policing every joke we make. We have bigger problems like flight delays, mechanical issues. But those voices were quieter now, overshadowed by a wave of employees who saw the bigger picture. In an age of social media and instant virality, a single act of discrimination could tarnish the airline's brand. More importantly, it was simply the right thing to do. The words "bringing the world together" had to hold genuine meaning, or they meant nothing at all. Fired from Sky Blue Air, Vanessa and Daniel tried to salvage their reputations by sharing emotional updates on social media, claiming they'd been unfairly punished. Their story backfired when the public, especially people from diverse backgrounds, denounced them for mocking travelers' accents. Hashtags like #RespectAllAccents trended briefly, and local Atlanta news interviewed passengers who had also endured Vanessa and Daniel's dismissive remarks. Instead of sympathy, the former employees drew harsh criticism, with industry contacts distancing themselves to avoid bad publicity. Meanwhile, David Chambers and the Sky Blue Air Board felt vindicated in their decision. HR documented numerous past complaints against Vanessa and Daniel, ensuring the airline was well prepared should any legal action arise. Imani noticed their online outcry but chose not to engage. She focused instead on her new role and the positive changes spreading through the company. In the end, Vanessa and Daniel realized that a few moments of cruel laughter had triggered severe, irreversible consequences, especially when the one witnessing their behavior was the very CEO of Sky Blue Air. 2 weeks later, the dust had mostly settled. The orientation group officially completed their onboarding process, receiving department assignments and starting real work. True to Maria Pacheco's promise, Imani was offered a role leading a small sub-team called Global Voices Advocacy within the communications department. It was unprecedented for a newcomer, but David Chambers and Maria believed her passion and personal experiences made her uniquely qualified. On her first day in the new role, Imani walked into a newly designated office space on the 21st floor. It was modest, just enough room for a desk, a few chairs, and a small round table for meetings. A large poster with the Sky Blue logo hung on one wall. She breathed in the moment, thinking of her family back in Ghana, her mother's support, and how far she had come from that humiliating encounter at the airport counter. A knock sounded at the door. Zoe peeked in with a grin, followed by Malik. Zoe held a potted plant, bright green leaves spilling over the rim. "Office warming gift," she announced, placing it on Imani's desk. Malik held up a folder. "And I brought some stories from fellow employees about their experiences with accent discrimination ready for the training modules." Imani beamed. "Thank you both. I couldn't ask for better colleagues." Over the coming days, the trio worked tirelessly, editing scripts for role-playing videos, coordinating with graphic designers for interactive e-learning courses, and organizing in-person workshops to be launched at key airport hubs. They gathered input from employees across continents, ensuring the new training addressed real-life scenarios. David Chambers popped in occasionally, offering insight or simply a word of encouragement. Slowly but surely, the airline's culture began to shift. Managers scheduled round-the-clock respect in service sessions for all ground staff. Flight attendants received additional training on how to handle language barriers with patience. Corporate teams were urged to reflect on unconscious biases. It was a monumental undertaking, changing behavior and awareness in a global workforce, but progress was evident. One bright morning, Imani woke to an internal memo praising the rollout of the new training at Hartsfield-Jackson Atlanta International Airport. Complaints about rude service plummeted. Passengers posted glowing feedback online, praising the helpfulness and empathy of Sky Blue Air staff. The cynics who once rolled their eyes at corporate diversity talk were gradually coming around. Late that afternoon, Imani's phone rang. The caller ID showed a private number. She answered tentatively. "Hello?" A familiar voice greeted her. "Imani, it's David Chambers. I just left a meeting with the board. They're thrilled with the improvements at our Atlanta hub, not to mention the positive press we're getting. I wanted to personally thank you." Imani flushed with pride. "I appreciate the support, Mr. Chambers. It's been a team effort." He chuckled. "That's what I keep saying, but we both know how crucial your perspective was. Let's keep the momentum going. There's still a lot of work to do." Imani nodded, even though he couldn't see her. "Absolutely. We won't let up." They ended the call with mutual respect. Leaning back in her office chair, Imani let the events of the past few weeks sink in. From being ridiculed at a check-in counter to spearheading a vital cultural initiative, life had a funny way of turning adversity into opportunity. All it took was a few minutes of unkind laughter to trigger an entire organizational overhaul. Though Vanessa and Daniel had reaped the consequences of their actions, the larger outcome was profoundly positive. Sky Blue Air was becoming a model of inclusion, attracting new customers who appreciated not just its routes and prices, but its values. The swift reaction of the new CEO had sent ripples throughout the industry, signaling that times were changing. Imani reflected on the notion of karma, how the negativity the two ex-employees had sown came back to them 100-fold, while the dignity she maintained led her to a bright new path. It wasn't always so direct or immediate in real life, but sometimes, if you're lucky, the balance is restored just when you need it most. True transformation often arrives when we least expect it. For Imani, that change began with a single, painful laugh at the check-in counter, but it ended in a movement that reshaped an entire corporation's ethos. At Sky Blue Air, the swift termination of 2 employees became more than a punishment. It was a clarion call for respect, empathy, and the celebration of every voice. Over mere weeks, training programs, leadership opportunities, and a renewed commitment to understanding diverse perspectives radically altered the airline's culture. The world saw how one small moment of cruelty sparked a wave of accountability and healing. Your voice matters. Stand for what's right and watch how kindness resonates, sometimes from the top down. Remember to like this video, share it with friends, and subscribe to stay updated on more inspiring stories. Because together, we can create ripples of change and ensure every voice is heard with dignity and respect.